In a better world, all D&D players are perfect little angels, God's favorite princess, and the prettiest girl in the world. However, that's not this world, as apparent by all the D&D horror stories out there. People are incredibly flawed, and perfection is an unattainable concept, so of course that is going to end up manifesting in this very personable tabletop role-playing game. You could very easily do something or say something that can upset another person at the table without even knowing it. Social interactions are really hard, and a lot of people have had to learn how to do them, and especially had to read people, like myself, where you've had to learn it over many years. Every time you do anything, and especially when you're talking to another person, you are flicking the proverbial bean of infinity, so don't be so hard on yourself if you aren't very good at communicating with people at first. We're all just people in the end, just trying to, learn how to work with each other. With that said, I think that we should all strive to reach perfection, even if it's not technically reachable. I think it's just, we should better ourselves for the sake of being better. So as a DM, what exactly am I looking for in a player? So if I had to give just one singular thing that I would want people to focus on to make their gameplay better as a D&D player, the one thing that I think takes a good player to great, or a great player to masterful, that singular thing is to engage the other players at your table. You do this one thing, you'll be your DM's favorite player, you will probably be the player that everyone at your table loves, and then you can also just live with the satisfaction that you are making a much more collaborative experience for everyone at, in your friend group. So what exactly do I mean by engaging your fellow player? To illustrate this point, I am going to go ahead and bring up a personal anecdote, because of course, this channel is just me processing information through the lens of D&D. Back in the winter of 2018, I was invited to a Christmas party with a few people from my video game development club. Normally I don't really go out to parties and whatnot, but I knew I wouldn't necessarily be out of my element because it was a lot of comp sci, writing and art and music nerds, kind of just hanging out. So I invited my girlfriend, who I had only been dating around 9 months or so at that point, and she didn't know anyone at that party. I went, I had a good time, I talked to people who I liked, I ate good food, and I never really engaged with her. I let my girlfriend just kind of sit somewhere where she didn't know anyone, and she just sat while I had fun, and she didn't really have fun. Not necessarily my proudest moment, but I am bringing it up now because I think I've grown from it. It's a little presumptuous, but I think that a lot of us have had that kind of experience where we feel a little bit left out or not having our needs addressed in a group setting. That could be a family gathering, just a new group of friends, maybe a new class, or you're put on a group project, anything like that, where you're out of a clique, right? Dungeons & Dragons is such a deeply collaborative game, but I do often feel like some players forget that there's other people at the table with them. To be a bad D&D player is to not take account of what other people are doing at the table or not caring about what other people are doing at the table. To be a bad D&D player is to act like I did at that party. It's not being very aware of everyone's kind of social and happiness level. You don't necessarily want anyone at a D&D table feeling like they're left out of the game or feeling like they're not able to participate. To be a good D&D player is to be very deeply aware of what everyone else is doing just around you and taking care of your party both in and out of game. I personally really hope that everyone at a table really wants all their friends at that table to be having a good time, or if you're not friends with them, to make friends with people at the table. I would really hope that you want them to participate and be part of that story. And so, if they're not, being part of that story, you kind of help lead them into it. For one, that's great because it kind of relieves a little bit of pressure off the DM's shoulders. They don't need to intervene as much. And then also, if you are bringing people into scenes, you're also getting a scene for yourself. So it's kind of that thing of you are being selfless and you are also getting things back for it. And I think that's a win-win for a lot of people. You also get the additional bonus of just helping your DM, because as a DM, I am always keeping track of how much my players are participating. If I feel like they're not participating enough, I try to prod them more with questions, and if they really aren't biting, I throw an NPC conversation at them, or I try to get one of the other players to talk to them. If you are the kind of player who goes up to the player who's not talking as much, then you're probably going to be the DM's favorite, because you are giving them a chance to not have to talk for a little bit. And as a DM, I try not to, talk as much as possible, because every second that I talk as an NPC or anything else, that's a second away from my players. And I want my players to be having the most fun here. Dude, I get 90% of the scenes. I don't need that. With all that said, I think that this advice on itself is a little bit hard to implement and it takes some practice, but I am just going to discuss it very briefly and bring up my own personal notes of what I think you could do to improve this skill. So I'm going to go over a few things that you can start implementing into your gameplay if you aren't that player already. But if you are that player already, I think it's just good to go over it and think about how much more you could do to engage the other people at your table. I kind of consider this like advice within the advice, because I think with all advice, you can kind of like subdivide it a little bit more. These might be a little bit all over the place, and they can definitely apply to other parts of just being a good D&D player, but I think that these should all be done with the intended goal of being a more engaging player for the rest of your table. Number 1, have fun. I want to make it extremely clear that when I am saying to be a more selfless role player, to give other people a chance to play and be more engaging to players at your table, that does not mean don't play the game. I've kind of heard like this misconception from people who I've brought this up to, where they think that you have to kind of be quiet to be an active participant. There is very actionable empathy that you can show to people at your table, and that's something that you can practice by kind of making sure that you're tracking who's doing what. This is very much like an oxygen mask kind of situation. Make sure that you're putting the oxygen mask on yourself so that you are able to help other people around you. You can't expect to help facilitate fun at your table if you're not making sure that you are yourself having fun at that table. You should absolutely be having fun with the rest of your party. If you're not having fun, then you need to start considering how much you're giving to other people and how much you want to, have for yourself. Although, again, you don't want to take so much that you are starting to look selfish. It takes like you got to be a villager kind of beat. Like you have to be willing to care about people and sacrifice a little bit to have a good time, but also don't sacrifice so much that you're miserable. It's a fine balance. So when people tell you to give other people at the table a chance to speak or to a chance to have their own moments, that doesn't mean don't speak. Obviously you might want to stay quiet if it's their scene, but if someone's not talking, you can talk to them to bring them in. Number 2, pay attention to other people. When I'm at any D&D table or TTRPG table, I'm very, very hyper aware of how much time is being used per player at that table. I'm running like a mental clock of how much one person has been talking and like how many scenes a certain player has had. I'm always thinking about this kind of thing because I want to make sure that everyone is kind of like having a good amount of fun at the table, and I'm trying to distribute as many scenes as I can like equally, or having enough content for everyone to be satisfied. Of course, there are going to be, arcs where certain players are favored a little bit, but you do want to make sure that everyone's still cared for to a certain extent. When I'm a player, I do the exact same thing. I'm keeping a mental map of how many scenes like every other player has had at the table. Let's say that you're player 1, right? And you have had 2 to 3 scenes in your D&D session so far. Player 2 has had about, 2 scenes. Player 3 has had 3 scenes. But player 4 only had 1 scene. So when the moment comes when the DM is trying to prod the players to do the next thing, I'm going to look at, how many other players have done how much. So player 4 has done less, and I will take a moment. I'm not immediately going to jump in because I've had more scenes than some other people, and I'm just going to see if player 4 is willing to speak up and do something for themselves. The first thing I would recommend that you try is help the DM out a little bit. Maybe the DM might mention to the player like, oh, what do you want to do? But if they don't, you can do the same thing. Be like, oh, I haven't heard from player 4 in a little while. I want to see them have a scene. This kind of opens up the discussion to, show that you are, one, recognizing that this player maybe deserves a little bit more scenes, and you kind of bring that to attention at the table. Of course, it depends on how your table feels about that kind of thing, but there's some kind of variation that might work at your table to help bring others in. And if they're unable to think of their own scene, or they don't know how to interact, or they don't have a thing to go off of, then I would recommend that you as a player jump in and roleplay with them. It could just be like, oh, well, I haven't talked to player 4 today, so I'll go up and I'll talk to them at camp, or I'll take them out to the shopping plaza with. Essentially, the idea is that you want to give the player the chance to have a little bit of that agency. You can play like mini DM, because I think honestly, as a player, you're all playing mini DM. You're just not thinking of the whole world, but you're caring about people at the table. You play a mini DM, you give them a chance to have their own agency, be like, oh, what do you want to do? And then if they can't do that, you give them the assist. You go up and you start kind of acting with them. You roleplay with them, kind of ask them leading questions. But always put the ball in their court first. Number 3, pace yourself. This one is very hard to explain, I think, and it's a little bit harder to put in practice, but it's essentially this. It's to learn how to tell your story in a very efficient manner. This is something I've actually been very critical of my own players at the table, because I want people to understand when enough is enough when they're having a scene. It's a particular skill they can develop of knowing how much time you are taking at the table and making sure that you're leaving enough space so that other people can have scenes too. Think any movie scene. They get through the emotional highs and lows within just a few minutes because they only have so much runtime to try to get that across to you. A lot of people only play a D&D session for maybe, 2 to 3 hours, right? I mean, I personally run very long games, but think about that in runtime. How long do each of those individual scenes, how long do they last? I've made a lot of media references recently, so let's jump back to Superman 2025. I'm not going to spoil anything, but just think about that Superman and Lois interview scene. It's very early in the movie, so I don't consider it much of a spoiler at all. And I'm not going to talk about specifics, but Superman and Lois, they argue, and that all happens within about 8 minutes or so, not even 10 minutes. You get a lot of information about Superman's character, you get a lot of information about Lois, you get a lot of information about their relationship, all within 8 minutes. It kind of gets right to the point. And even though, some of the things, they're getting angry and they go back down, but they do it in a very efficient manner. They are telling you new things about the character, and they are not going, in circles and in circles. On the other hand, I have definitely sat through D&D scenes that overstay their welcome. And yes, a DM can cut people off and just tell them, hey, let's move on to someone else. But as a player, I think it's a lot more effective if you yourself are aware that a scene's taking too long. Because I've sat through scenes where people go in these circular arguments for 30 minutes plus, and there are other people at the table just waiting to get their turn. Circular arguments happen in real life, and yes, they are realistic, but we're playing a fantasy game where we're trying to tell a story. And part of telling a story is learning how to kind of, trim the fat, right? Because remember, when you do a 30-minute dialogue with a random NPC, right? And there's 4 other people at the table, that's 4 other people that have to sit through 30 minutes of something that might be circular and isn't telling anything new about the characters. And you need to make sure that if you're having an argument, it's showing something about your character. And we can easily show that a character is stubborn and is having a circular argument without it having to be 30 minutes. Like, we can get the idea if the conversation gets cut off early. So kind of just get a feel, think about your favorite scenes from, films where people have these emotional moments. How long do they really last? I think a lot, one that I really think of is, the Bard's Lament from Critical Role, Campaign 1, right? That all happened within a few minutes. Yeah, it was nowhere near 30 minutes. It felt long and it felt impactful because of, how concise it really was. So, try it. Learn how to make efficient scenes. If you're feeling like you're going too long, try to do things in threes. Have the same argument 3 times and then cut it off, right? Or you make the same joke 3 times. Comedy comes in threes, whatever, right? And if that truly isn't working for you, another thing that you can just do, literally set a timer on your phone and put a little vibration on it, put a buzzer, right? And treat that kind of like when you're at a comedy show and the host put up the light that the guy has to get off in a minute. Do that for yourself, right? Teach yourself to, get off stage when you need to. Okay, I've rambled for a really long time. Essentially, I just want people to be a little bit better at being more kind of not empathetic, but also just very hyper aware of what's going on at their table. I think that's what makes a fantastic player, is trying to get the person around you to speak. It's the same idea of hey, you're in a friend group and someone isn't feeling included. Include them. Do your best so that everyone at your table feels like they belong in some way, be it in-game and they all feel satisfied that they're getting their character moments. And also, it's great just to roleplay with each other as, characters. That's one thing that I really look forward to. Don't just talk to me. I would prefer not to talk during my my D&D time, because I gotta take notes and there's so many more things I would rather do, and I just want people to talk. But thank you so much for watching. Just let me know in the comments if you have ever, successfully gotten a quiet player to be more engaged in the story and they kind of open up to you guys over the course of a game. I would love to hear that, because I think that the ability to bring people into a world and have them truly immerse themselves and have fun, That is the ability of a good player, and I want to see that there are good players in these comment sections or good DMs in here. But thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys next time.